It starts with something small. One bird on a wire, then two. And then, somewhere along the way, without you even noticing, your yard just becomes something different. All you did was fill a feeder. That's it. A little wooden house on a pole, some seeds from the hardware store. Maybe you grabbed a sunflower mix because the bag said it attracts more species. You figured it was a nice thing to do. Something quiet, a small gift to whatever wildlife was passing through. But something else had already been noticed. And it wasn't just the birds. Your neighbor had been watching too. And that one small, well-meaning decision, that one thing, set off something neither of you saw coming. A system, an escalation, a silent war with no real winners playing out 6 feet off the ground, right in the middle of your backyard. This is what that war actually looks like. Here's what most people never really think about. Birds aren't passive. They're not just flying decorations waiting around to be fed. They're scouts, strategists. Their whole survival depends on remembering places, tracking food sources, and tipping off hundreds of others, sometimes within minutes of finding something good. So when you put up that feeder, you didn't just attract birds, you got registered on a network, a living, constantly updated intelligence grid that stretches across your entire neighborhood. And the moment your neighbor put up their feeder, like 15 feet away, just on the other side of the fence, that network didn't just grow, it changed in ways neither of you could see, in ways that were already reshaping the behavior of every creature moving through your yard. Here's the real question. What happens when two feeding stations start competing? This isn't a cute bird story. It's really not. This is about what happens when human ego, animal instinct, and forces none of us fully understand all collide in the smallest possible arena, your backyard. Because what started as two neighbors doing something kind for wildlife quietly turned into one of the most intense, bizarre, and weirdly revealing social experiments in modern suburban life. By the time this is done, you'll never look at a bird feeder the same way again. I genuinely mean that. If this kind of thing interests you, the hidden stuff, the stuff going on just beneath the surface of everyday life, make sure you're subscribed, because this is what we do here. Every time. We go deep. All right, let's get into it. At first, everything feels fine. You put the feeder up in early spring. A few chickadees show up first, they always do. Then a pair of nuthatches, a downy woodpecker. And honestly, the yard just feels different now, more alive. There's something almost meditative about it. Standing at the kitchen window, coffee in hand, watching this tiny feathered world just go about its morning. It feels stable, calm. The birds come and go on their own quiet schedule. Early morning, just before dusk. The feeder empties slowly. You refill it every few days. Easy. But here's the thing you're not seeing. Every single visit is being cataloged, not by you, by them. Chickadees have a spatial memory that researchers have compared, weight for weight, to some of the most sophisticated recall systems in the animal kingdom. They're logging your feeder, the time of day it's fullest, how much human movement is nearby, the best escape routes. They are, in every real sense, building a map, and maps get shared. That peaceful little routine you've settled into, it has a timer on it, and your neighbor just started the clock. The day your neighbor puts up their feeder. That's the day your yard changes. Even if nothing looks different yet, think about it from the bird's perspective. Before, there was one source, one reliable stop. Now there are two 15 feet apart, and just like that, the whole equation shifts. Why stick to one feeder when you can move between two? Why hold territory at a single point when the entire corridor between them suddenly becomes the prize? This is where things start getting genuinely strange. Species that were perfectly happy at your feeder start drifting over to test the neighbors. Not because your seed got worse, nothing changed on your end. But in the world of foraging animals, a second option doesn't just double the food, it changes the whole shape of the environment. Scientists actually have a name for this: optimal foraging theory. The idea that animals are constantly, almost automatically, recalculating where their energy is best spent. And here's what that means in practice. More birds overall start getting pulled to this one little block. Sparrows that used to range a quarter-mile away are now stopping here. Starlings, loud, bold, not exactly welcome, start circling the edges. Your chickadees are still showing up, but now they're edgier. The whole social structure is quietly shifting, and you just refilling the feeder. Maybe noticing there seem to be more birds lately, thinking that's kind of nice. There are more, and it's only going to get louder from here. This is where human psychology walks into the ecosystem. Your neighbor notices something's off. Their feeder isn't getting the traffic yours is. Maybe they see it from their window, your side of the fence buzzing with activity while theirs just feels quiet. And almost without thinking, they do what people almost always do when something feels uneven. They escalate. A premium seed mix goes in. Safflower, Niger thistle. The stuff that costs 3 times more comes in a bag with a cardinal on it. Then maybe a second feeder. A tube feeder for finches, a suet block for woodpeckers. Within a week, they've basically turned their yard into a bird buffet. And here's where it gets interesting. Those same scouts, those same mapping intelligences, they detect the upgrade. And the birds start sorting themselves. Cardinals drift toward the premium seed. Finches find the thistle tube. Woodpeckers go straight for the suet. Your neighbor's yard fills up. Your chickadees start splitting their time. You notice, and that quiet, slightly competitive part of your brain, the same part that clocks when someone else's lawn looks better than yours, starts doing the math. What seed are you using exactly? Could you add a water feature? Maybe a heated bird bath? The arms race has started. Neither of you planned it. Neither of you would even call it that. But here you are. Here's the part nobody actually talks about. While you and your neighbor are out there competing, spending money, upgrading setups, quietly keeping score of which yard has more traffic, the birds are learning something that you aren't. They're learning from you. Researchers who study backyard bird behavior have found that a lot of common feeder species can tell individual human faces apart. They recognize movement patterns. They adjust how they act depending on whether a specific person is around. A bird that's watched you refill that feeder 50 times, it knows what that motion means. It knows the sound of your back door. It has timed your routine, probably better than you have. And then they share that information. Alarm calls, contact calls, the subtle way a whole flock shifts when a feeder's empty versus full, all of it carries information, and it spreads through the local bird population faster than you'd ever be able to track. Ornithologists studying chickadees have found that their calls actually encode things: threat level, food quality, even which predators are nearby. This isn't just simple signaling, it's closer to language than most people are comfortable admitting. So here's the thing. While you're playing a game of competing generosity with your neighbor, the birds are playing a completely different game, an older one they've been winning for millions of years. They're not grateful, they're not loyal, they're optimizing. And right now, you're the resource they're optimizing around. By midsummer, the yard barely looks like itself anymore. 50 birds where there used to be 5, 3 species where there used to be 1. The noise kicks off before dawn. The seed bill has tripled, and there's a smell now, that faint, sour edge of hulls rotting under the feeder, drawing in insects, which draw in mice, which draw in hawks that now circle low over the neighborhood in these long, slow, patient arcs. The predators you never even thought about, they're a presence now. And the smaller birds, the ones you started all this for, they're under pressure. Sparrows have taken over the platform feeder. Starlings mob the suet. House finches pile up 3 deep at the thistle tube. This whole tangle of wings and aggression that looks less like nature and more like rush hour on a bad day. What you've built, without meaning to, is an artificial high-density environment, a bird city. And like any city, it's got problems that didn't exist before it existed. Disease moves faster when birds are packed together. Territorial fights burn energy that those birds should be using just to survive. Species that would naturally range across a full mile of habitat are now squeezing themselves into a 30-foot corridor between 2 fence posts. You wanted to help. And honestly, in some ways you did. But you also built something with weight to it. An ecosystem shaped by human competition instead of natural balance. And that kind of thing has a gravity that's really hard to walk back from. Here's what nobody tells you when you buy a bird feeder. You're not just feeding birds. You're making a decision about habitat, about animal behavior, about all these invisible systems quietly governing every living thing in your neighborhood. The moment you stepped into that competition with your neighbor, you stopped being a bystander. You became a variable in a living experiment. and variables have effects. The birds know exactly how many sources are on this block. They know which one's more reliable. They know which feeder gets filled on Tuesdays and which one's empty by Thursday afternoon. They have stress-tested your generosity and found its schedule. Figured you out, basically. Meanwhile, both you and your neighbor have put way more money, time, and mental energy into a $50 piece of wood and plastic than either of you ever planned to. And neither of you can quite bring yourselves to stop, because stopping feels like losing. And that right there, that's the moment worth actually sitting with. So who really started the arms race? Not you, not your neighbor. The birds did. Not on purpose, not out of some calculated plan. Just by doing exactly what millions of years of evolution built them to do. Find resources, compete for them, exploit every available edge. In doing that, they set up the conditions for a human rivalry that neither side fully saw coming. You thought you were feeding birds, but two neighbors, two feeders, good intentions, and totally normal human competitiveness. That's genuinely all it takes to build a miniature version of every resource conflict in human history. Territory, escalation, sunk costs, that stubborn inability to be the first one to back down. The birds didn't start it because they're clever. They started it because the underlying system, scarcity, competition, visible abundance, runs the exact same way regardless of who's playing. Finches or nations, doesn't really matter. Your backyard was the board. You and your neighbor were the pieces. And the birds, they were just living their lives.